Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dermot and Phillips Political Podcast, or podcast as we used to call it. We'll be joined by a very special guest, Ronan McGreevy, now in a couple of minutes. But I think we'll all agree it's been a pretty momentous week here in Ireland and around the world generally. What with all the protests, the fuel protests here in Ireland and the blockades and the events in the Persian Gulf, Donald Trump having a go at the Pope, the Hungarian election, which was an absolute landslide against the sitting Viktor Orban. So there's an awful lot to talk about. And I'm just going to start giving my own, while Ronan's coming in, my own opinions on what the protests and the blockages or the blockades that have occurred over the last week. And I think, you've got to have sympathy for the farmers and the hauliers and anyone that's involved, farmers as well, anyone that's involved in purchasing a lot of diesel and petrol for their to carry out their daily duties. And these protests were spontaneously organised. I mean, there was no coordination between the whole country. They were sort of sprung up here, there and everywhere, which possibly might have been a bit of a detriment to them if they had been organised under the auspices of, say, the Irish Farmers Association or the Road Hauliers Association. Then it may have had a little bit more effect. But as it was, I mean, there was social media came to the fore there and galvanized people in all areas of the country to get together very quickly to literally shut the country down for a couple of days. I mean, when did you ever see O'Connell Street completely blocked up with tractors? Anyway, here we go. Here's our special guest arriving, Ronan McGreevy, the best-selling author and the author of Sean the Mass, the last memoir, which the last time I checked, Ronan, was number 2 in the non-fiction bestseller charts.
That's right, yes. I've been held up the top by The Short History of Ireland by James Hawke, I think is his name.
Oh, yes, a worthy book, but not as good as yours.
You have to remember, of course, that Fairy Tale in New York was held off the top by the Pet Shop Boys back in the day. So, there's some honour in being second.
Oh, there is. But you've still got time to get first. And Ronan, I was just starting off to say it's been a pretty momentous week worldwide, especially here in our own little country with the protests and the blockades that were going on.
Yes.
So what's your opinion of it? Do you think, I was just going on the line there, if it had been coordinated under the auspices of, say, the IFA or the Road Haulage Association, it might have had a bigger effect. But as it had a huge effect.
Well, it did. I mean, it was an example of people power. A lot of public support has to be said. I was in my capacity as a journalist in the Irish Times. I was out most days on O'Connell Street. I think the people involved in it were, for the main part, decent, honourable people. You don't take your tractor to the middle of Dublin in spring when it should be your busy time of the year if you have nothing to protest about. And this was the thing. I mean, I think they may have overplayed their hand a bit. But it was 6 days. I think it was. It could have been a lot worse, I have to say. I think it's not a very popular thing to say, but I think government just about played it right in the sense that had they gone in too hard too quickly, they would have probably emboldened the protesters even more. There could have been very, very ugly scenes, and there would have been accusations of heavy-handedness and so on. So it took a few days for the impact of this to really affect ordinary people, by which time the government sensed a change in the mood in the country, I thought. And it seems to be over. But I mean, that's only the start of it. I mean, we're entering a very, very, very difficult period, and not just in Ireland, but everywhere else, because of what's going on with fuel prices at the moment.
Yeah. Do you think that the protests? I know you say it's nearly over now. I was in Cavan earlier on today, on the way back from Donegal, and there was a kind of I'll call it a pedestrian protest, with just a couple of tractors in, but the numbers, and maybe there's 200 people in it. So I think we've probably reached its tipping point at the moment. It should be it should have be back to if there is such a thing as back to normal now over the next few days. But regarding the protests are one thing. You're allowed in this country to protest peacefully, lawfully.
Yeah.
Blockade is quite another thing, though, isn't it? Blockades are not legal.
That's absolutely correct, but they are effective. And that's the thing. I mean, would the government have brought this package of measures through if the country hadn't been disrupted the way it was? This is, unfortunately, the reality of it is that the government was chugging along. They were talking to the road hauliers, and they were talking to the farmers organizations, and they were preempted by these ginger strikes, really, basically strikes that were organized online and so on. And they did capture the mood of an awful lot of people in the country. And that was it, really. I mean, I have a great deal of sympathy for farmers involved, but it's not all the Irish government's fault. I do not understand, right? I mean, I know oil prices have gone up. I might have mentioned this the last time. They went up from an average of about $75 a barrel to $100 a barrel. That's actually a 33% increase. But why has green diesel, which farmers use for themselves, why has that doubled in price since the start of the war? It's gone from 90 cents a litre to, in some cases, 180 cents a litre. How does that happen? I mean, I don't understand it. How is home heating oil doubled since the war began? I mean, who's making money out of this? Because I mean, the government is taking its share, obviously, through excise duty, etc. But it's not taking all of it. Somebody is making money out of this misery, and I'd love to know who it is. And I guess we in the media should really be interrogating this, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
Well, I mean, it sounds like you could go down a rabbit hole with that one, because surely if the government should introduce maybe price caps to stop profiteering on things like that, because we all know what happened with central heating oil. It went from, I think, €480 for 500 litres to about 900 in the space of 2 weeks.
But why?
The stuff was probably in the depots already paid for by the time it was just profiteering. That's basically all I can see.
But by who?
I'm aware of I won't name the firm here, a firm locally here in Leitrim. They were rung up just after this thing started, and they were told, sorry, we haven't got any oil to give to you. So when he rang back 2 days later, yes, we have oil, but it's gone up €100 for a fill. So, it's somebody is not telling the truth here, or somebody is actually making money on the back of this.
Well, there was the Competition Authority investigated this and found that the forecourts had no cause to answer. So here we are back again at the start, back to the question that I asked you. We know that oil prices, wholesale oil prices, have gone up by, as I said, roughly speaking, 33%. Yeah. But why is, and remember, and this is another thing pretty important people get, right? The price of a litre of petrol, diesel, or whatever, only a third of it is the actual cost of the diesel and oil itself, right? So 2/3 of the cost of a litre of oil or a litre of diesel is taken either by the government or by the retailer, right? So again, if you take a third, so even if gas and oil prices go up by a third, you have to reduce that by a third to about 11%, which would be the unit cost of a litre of fuel or gas. That is the unit cost that has gone up since the war started, roughly speaking, right? And yet here we are, with, as we said before, oil and green diesel, home heating oil, almost doubling in price. Yeah. And I'd love to get to the bottom of this myself, because you can blame the government, and the government takes a huge amount of money in excise and carbon tax and all the rest, right? But who else is getting the money here? Where should the protesters be directing their ire for this? True. I think that's the question that they need to ask themselves.
I can see an expose in the Irish Times coming up over this, Ronan.
Well, we've all been. I mean, I'm talking to you about this now, and I think we in the media really need to answer these questions. Myself included. Why Why are prices going up far higher than they are at the wholesale level on the international markets?
True.
Yeah, that's the question.
Sure thing. Now, just moving on as a kind of a follow on from the blockades and the protests, the vote of no confidence in the government tomorrow, has it got any chance of succeeding?
No, it hasn't. There hasn't any chance of succeed. Remember, Fianna Fáil together are only 2 seats short of an overall majority. They've got 7 independents. I know they already have Michael Healy-Rae in the bag. His brother is on the fence as usual. The author Sean Canny, that gives them the majority. It'll be a chance for the opposition parties to sound off and so on, but no, they won't bring the government down.
Right. It'll be a tight vote, though.
I don't know. Well, let me see. What have they got at the moment? They've got a fairly strong majority. The problem is this, right? Just say they were to succeed, right? What then? I mean, do we have a general election?
Well, that's the usual thing, isn't it? After the vote of no confidence.
Yeah, it is.
And we don't need that. We need that like a hole in the head at the moment.
Well, we need it, and I'll tell you what, the opposition needed like a hole in the head as well, because we're not going to have an alternative government in this country until the opposition get their act together, in the sense that they need to have a coordinated program. They need to have a coordinated vote sharing arrangements, etc. They're not going to get that in the short term. This is something they should already be working on. They should have a common platform. We thought that was going to happen after Catherine Connolly was elected as president. It hasn't happened yet. And until they do, they're not going to replace this government, unpopular and all as it is. And I just don't. This is political grandstanding tomorrow, and it's basically trying to embarrass a few of the independent TDs and put pressure on them. But I don't see this succeeding.
Do you see, plan B on this one? Do you see inside either Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil a push for leadership change?
No, I don't. This is.
I think they're safe enough.
No, I don't. I mean, if you look at it, right, I mean, the biggest competitor to Micheál Martin is Jim O'Callaghan, and he didn't cover himself in glory last week. I think he annoyed some of his colleagues by jumping the gun and talking about getting the army involved. That wasn't really necessary.
Yeah.
That should be a last resort, not something that you think about off the top of your head. So the answer is no. I don't see a change of leadership in either party. This is going to be an international issue. The German government just brought down the price of diesel by 17 cents. It's going to create huge problems across the world if this nonsense in Iran continues. And a lot of governments are going to be under a lot of pressure. Fortunately, this government has the financial firepower to deal with this issue. But the question is this: if for instance, this issue is resolved, and the government has wasted all its kind of firepower by cutting excise duty on fuel, and the price of oil drops back to what it was pre-war, what happens then? I mean, there's a case to be made for cheaper. I mean, there's definitely a case to be made for cheaper fuel in this country anyway. But if you forego the excise, I think it's about €4 billion a year. And even if you cut that in half, that's $2.5 billion that have to be made to be recouped elsewhere. So where does the government get that money from?
Exactly. And going to the root of the start of the cause of all this, what do you make of our favourite presidents blockading the Straits of Hormuz?
Well, I just think it's all nonsense. Now, I think it's important to state what he's talking about is blocking the Straits of Hormuz for Iranian ships rather than for ships related to other countries. I think he wants to put pressure on the Iranians, but he also wants to put pressure on the Chinese, because they're the ones who take the most oil from Iran. So that's kind of. I'm just wondering, in this case, if there's method in this madness. I just think this whole war has gone on far too long. Well, obviously, we had no agreement last weekend, but at least they were talking. So the first time that Americans and Iranians have sat down face to face since 1979. I know there was no positive outcome to that, and of course, Trump is off on another one of his rants again. But I don't know how much longer this can go on, because his own base at home is hurting over this, as the rest of us are. He's alienated every country in the world. That won't bother him too much, I suspect. But when you look at how unpopular this war is in the US at the moment, you would think that common sense might prevail at some stage soon. But I don't like what he's about to do. But when the alternative is direct invasion of Carrick Island, with all the killing and suffering that would result, I suppose it's be thankful for small mercies type thing. But he really has got himself into the worst tangle that I've ever seen from an American president, even worse than Iraq, because at least Iraq, there was some rationale for it. You mightn't agree with it, but there was a rationale for it. There's no rationale for this.
Especially as Pete Hegseth apparently fired a number of high-ranking generals prior to this thing kicking off. Now, was that done so that there'd be no dissenting voices in the room whenever the invasion was, or the thing was announced, or was it just that Trump's on a power trip, that his ego is so big, he thinks he knows better than all the generals put together?
Well, this is the playbook of turning a democratic country into an authoritarian one. I mean, he fired the chief of staff of the army. I think his name is Kane, if I'm not mistaken. No, that's the guy. I can't remember his name, but it's really sinister behavior. No, it's very sinister behavior. I don't know where it's all going to end now.
On a similar, related note there, I mean, just to go back to the peace talks with the Iranians sent in their heavy hitters, the seasoned, experienced diplomats with experience in this type of thing. Yeah. Trump sends in his son-in-law, a real estate agent, and J.D. Vance, who's got literally no experience in that type of thing at all. I mean, what does that send out?
Well, it's amateur hour stuff, isn't it? And none of the three of them have any track record. I mean, they in relation to diplomacy. I mean, look at Witkoff. They've been trying to effect a breakthrough in Ukraine for the last 6 months, and they've got absolutely nowhere. They've been played by the Russians. I don't think that Jared Kushner should be there at all. Not just because he's the president's son-in-law, but because he has a direct pecuniary interest in many businesses in the Gulf states. J.D. Vance is a clown. You saw him go to directly interfere, most outrageous interference in a democratic election in Europe. He went over to endorse Viktor Orban. In fact, it had the opposite effect of what was intended. And the only thing that has to be said for J.D. Vance is, so we're led to believe, that he doesn't support this war, so he wants an end to it. But in the end of the day, it's only Trump can end this war, and he doesn't seem to be showing any signs of pulling out. Although, I mean, we're just off. Just before we came on air here, he gave an impromptu press conference in which he said the Iranians want to make a deal, but he's been saying that for the last 3 weeks.
Do you think that I can see similarities here between 1921 and De Valera sending Michael Collins over to England? Treaty. Trump sends Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, and if he doesn't come back with what he wants, he can blame him for it. Because let's face it, he has responsibility for anything,
Yeah, well, that's true. But also, I mean, the Civil War was for the want of a telephone, because you see, when Arthur Griffith and Michael Collins and that wanted to, when they were forced that sort of by Lloyd George to sign the treaty, they hadn't made any arrangements to make a telephone call to De Valera before they left. So they couldn't find De Valero when they went to sign the Anglo-Irish Treaty. And in fact, it was the following morning when he found out. Now, that's by the by, but what I mean by that is um, Trump can't really blame Vance for this, because he sent Vance over with a list of demands. And obviously, some of these demands were absolutely they were anathema to Iran. They were Maximus demands. Iran had demands of their own, and they didn't succeed. But and then, of course, we still have the situation whereby the Israelis are defying the entire world by continuing to pummel Hezbollah in Lebanon, causing thousands of casualties by the looks of things, many of them innocent civilians. And we found out last week in the New York Times an extraordinary article, which I would suggest your viewers there try and find, whereby it was Netanyahu who personally persuaded Trump that to start this war, that it would be a slam dunk, so to speak, even despite the fact that the nobody in the room, including Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, or even Pete Hegseth and Susie Wills, who's his chief of staff, they all pushed back against it, but Trump wouldn't listen to them. And so, in many ways, this is a proxy war for Israel that the USA is fighting, and the rest of us are suffering as a result.
I think, unless I'm mistaken, I think Netanyahu tried the same thing with both Obama and Joe Biden, and they more or less told them to take a hike. Which you're right. It is a proxy war, and it's like I was going to just briefly mention the Lebanon situation. I mean, do you see the Lebanon situation as being a thorn in the side of any peace talks? I mean, Iran have said they'll only talk if the Lebanon bombing stops. Is that going to happen?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, I don't know when you consider that the reason that Israel is targeting Hezbollah is because they're Iranian proxies, and if there is a ceasefire between the USA and Iran, then there should be a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. Now, there's supposed to be direct talks happening this week, I think, between Israel and Lebanon. I mean, the Prime Minister of Lebanon doesn't want Hezbollah there, but they are so embedded in South Lebanon that it's going to be really, really difficult for him to remove them. So I don't know what's going to happen here. The Israelis are completely out of control. We saw that in the war in Gaza. It's got an awful lot worse now. And, whereas Gaza was an international outrage, the problem with their actions against Iran and against Hezbollah is actually affecting everybody in the world now. It's affecting people because it's affecting the price of everything, and inflation is going to go through the roof now. And we're all paying. Everyone, those. Let's be straight about this. Those protesters would not have been in O'Connell Street. They wouldn't be blocking the Whitegate refinery. They wouldn't be blocking motorways if this war hadn't happened. So it all goes back to the same thing.
Exactly. And just as moving into Central Europe, I mean, I think what happened in Hungary yesterday was quite like an earthquake, really, in political terms, to see that Peter Magyar and his Teaser party taking 138 seats, completely wiping Viktor Orban off the map. His Fidesz party got 55 seats. I mean, that was huge news. I mean, I'm sure they were dancing in the streets of Ukraine when that came through last night, because now the opposition to the funding is gone, and Russia's earpiece in Europe has now been thrown onto the scrap heap of politics, at least for a number of years.
Well, we've had so much bad news internationally for the last year or so that I think this is the best news I have heard in such a long time. It's great news for the EU. It's great news for European solidarity. It's great news for the people of Hungary, who are going to be getting rid of a man who has impoverished and corrupted this country to an extent never seen in any EU state before. It's a bloody nose for Vladimir Putin. It's a bloody nose for the Trump administration, for J.D. Vance, right-wing populists across Europe. And it's also, I mean, if the crisis that would have happened in the EU had Orban been returned to office would have been absolutely existential, because there's no way that the EU could have dealt with Orban for another term with his policies, his constant policies of blocking the will of 26 of the member states to provide desperately needed aid for Ukraine. And there's no mechanism, unfortunately, to expel any country from Europe. But I don't know what they would have done, but they would have had to have a plan B in place whereby they wouldn't have dealt with Orban at all. And one of the reasons why Magyar won is because the EU is holding up 12 billion euros in funding for various different projects in Hungary because of the nature of the Orban regime. They simply could not trust that the money they would send to Hungary will be properly spent. So I'm hoping, first of all, that this is a new day for the people of Hungary. It's obviously the young people who voted for all of this, and I'm delighted about that.
I think there's a couple of pertinent points about this. As of up to the time we started broadcasting, Donald Trump had not rung Peter Magyar to congratulate him on his victory, which is hardly surprising. But secondly, the things that Orban did in Hungary over the last 7 or 8 years, Donald Trump has pretty much tried the same in America. He's tried to turn the judiciary into his own personal law firm. He's gone after the press and fake news, and Orban has done exactly the same as that. So now Magyar has got a big job on his hands to reconstitute things back to an acceptable level, and so that people can actually speak freely again and have their cases dealt with in the courts on a fair basis.
Exactly, and I think one of his first press, excuse me, one of his first press conferences was to state that the foreign minister, the one who had been leaking information from confidential EU summits to Sergei Lavrov, had gone into the Department of Foreign Affairs and burnt, incinerated, and shredded a lot of the papers. He said that this morning. I mean, this is mad stuff, totally mad stuff. And Magyar has a list of basically Orban's lackeys that he is going to that he has drawn up, who are going to be ousted from office, including the president, because they were simply political appointments made by Orban to do Orban's business, and that includes the head of the Supreme Court, the president of Hungary, and various different other officials who were simply put in place not because they had any degree of competency, but because they could be trusted by Orban to do his bidding. So there's a reckoning coming now in Hungary. It wouldn't surprise me if to see Orban on the next plane to Moscow, just like Assad and
or Mar-a-Lago.
What was the guy, the Ukrainian president that left? His name escapes me. He fled to Russia. Anyway, yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me to see half of Orban's government end up living in Russia.
I can see Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in America watching the events of the next month or so very carefully, with the November half term or the midterms coming up, because I think they'll be doing something similar come the new year.
There'll be a reckoning then.
They're reckoning. It's coming. I think it's definitely coming. Now, we're going to finish off on a thing that's happened today, and it's Donald Trump again, unfortunately, when he's decided to have a pop at Pope Leo. And I was amazed at this, Ron. I looked at a few statistics. There are upwards of 57 million Catholics living in the United States of America. That's 20% of the population. And if even 10% of those take offense to what Donald Trump has said, that's 5 million votes gone. Come the next
he did for shame, he did get the majority of the Catholic vote in the 24 election. But see, you got to understand, Philip, he doesn't care anymore. He's not going to go for a third term. He can insult anybody he wants. It's the people coming after him that are going to have to suffer the backlash for this. I mean, when you think that his Vice President J.D. Vance has made such a huge show of becoming a Catholic, or converting, obviously Marco Rubio is a Catholic too, so that's his two main men who are Catholics. It just doesn't make any sense. Look, he's a toddler. Like, he's basically a toddler with the biggest job in the world, unfortunately. And there was this extraordinary scene last week where apparently the papal nuncio in Washington was called into a meeting, and he was told that that the Americans would reduce the papacy to the Avignon papacy, which occurred in the 14th century when Philip, Philip the Fair, as he was known, the French
That's
king,
right. That's right.
and basically kidnapped the Pope. The Pope died, and the next one had to move to Avignon in France and stay there for nearly 70 years. I mean, this is mad stuff, mad stuff.
Indeed, but then it seems to me it's very, very short-sighted. A lot of people will take offense to it, and a lot of people that say, "Well, Donald Trump, he just can't control his mouth. He's just there. He goes again,"
Yeah,
But,
and he's not going for a third term. The gloves are off now, and he's just shown who he really is,
Yeah, that's it. And that's it. Now, Ronan, I believe, are you off to Wipers shortly?
Yes, I'm off on Thursday. I know we first met on this trip, so yeah, I have 29 on my trip this week,
Lovely.
starting on Thursday. So I'm looking forward to it as ever.
I'll just tell you what that trip is. I did it 2 years ago. As Ronan says, we met up on that trip. It goes to the Battle of the Somme and Flanders and the Irish involvement in the First World War, and it is an absolutely fantastic trip. And ring GTI Travel in Donabate, and they'll tell you all about it. But
Yes.
I hope you enjoy your trip, Dermot and Ronan, and be delighted to hear how you get on once you get back.
Thanks very much, and we'll speak in on. All right.
Good stuff. Safe
Thanks.
travel. Right, folks, thanks. That's it for tonight. Dermot was unfortunately tied up on another channel tonight. That's why he couldn't join us. But we'll be back in about a week or so's time with another upgrade and update, and hopefully things have settled down a bit. So until then, cheerio and enjoy the rest of the week.